Well, first off, Wake, thank you for joining us today. This is the first of its kind, first interview of its kind for jblbinsurance.com. So for those that don't know, this is Wakefield Hare I have with me today. He's with Greater Than Financial. Wakefield and I have known each other and been acquaintances since 7th or 8th grade, but we actually haven't really gotten to know each other really well until the past year and a half. So for that, I am grateful to have gotten to know you, and it's been a lot of fun. So, so a lot on our website, on our blog, we talk a lot about insurance, of course. And anytime you mention insurance, a lot of time their eyes glaze over. So I wanted to get a different perspective today from you. I guess first and foremost, could you just give us a 30,000-foot view of who Wakefield Hare is and what you do?
Yeah, and I warn you, you may have to cut me off because sometimes I'm known to ramble, or I just have a lot I want to get said and need to choose my words wisely to say it as efficiently as possible. So I think the main points to know about me are I am a very faithful man in the sense that I try to think as eternally as possible. And I have a wife whom I love and adore and children, so I'm a family man. That's what defines me. And in all those things, it's led me to pursuits of how do you make life as full as possible? What's the truth about getting life as full as possible? That wasn't why I started to be a financial planner or an advisor, but it has evolved to say, man, what a career to see the merge of wanting full life for you and for others, and then seeing you get to use your job, your work, to bring that and actually get paid to do so. So that's really, I think, the most important parts about me and why I have a firm like Greater Than Financial.
So you mentioned you're a financial planner. You're not an investment manager. You're not a financial advisor. Mm-hmm. What is it? Well, how's that different?
When people think about, oh, I need a financial advisor, their thoughts immediately go to, oh, because I have investment questions. And that's not by accident. That was because of the way the industry has evolved and really how it started as, and then had to move and just morph into, hey, it's not just about selling people stocks or bonds anymore. Like, it's moved into, you need to offer comprehensive financial management because the competition started to get so steep in just the brokerage part of investments. And now you kind of get like, oh yeah, we comprehensively advise on everything, but really a lot of those people still get paid on investments. And it's really about investment management. And we'll just put this little accessory of financial planning to it. And what I see is the next progression of the whole industry is like, no, you need to be sure everything financial in someone's life is working and moving together to deliver a fullness of life, because money's only so good as what it delivers you in the form of substance, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. And so in that evolution is pretty natural. And I'm trying to stay ahead on the curve and say, hey, let's be clear. I can help people make good investment decisions. An investment decision makes up only one portion on this big pie of what is your financial life really all about. And so that's the important distinction to make between someone who's investment management versus financial advisor versus financial planner. I want to categorize myself in that third. It's not to say that an investment manager is a bad person, or not at all, but that's what they're, an investment manager, and they shouldn't have a regard or a deep regard for the other areas of life. However, a planner said, let's see how it all ties together to deliver what you want.
I've heard you say it several times, as well as read on your website, every conversation about money is really a conversation about what's really important to you. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the quote, every conversation about money is really a conversation about what's important to you, is worth repeating 100 times, is essentially saying that people often say amount of money is an end for their goals. Like, hey, I am trying to make X amount of dollars. I'm trying to save X amount of dollars. And really it's to say, why are you trying to do that? Because what has a bank balance ever done for you? And someone would say, well, nothing, except if I have a good bank balance, then I can do X, Y, and Z. Well, then it's saying, well, really, then what's important to you is X, Y, and Z, and not the bank balance that gets you those things. And so too often people are just focused on that make money, make money, make money, as opposed to saying, no, money is a resource. It is a tool that can be used in a lot of negative ways, but also can support all of the things that you say, now this really is what brings me joy, whether that be, hey, I want to attend a baseball game because I love baseball, or I want to be at my kid's most important life markers, or I want to be the best spouse. I want to be fully present when I'm with my wife. Money can be used to do all of those things. But money can also be the thing, the single thing that actually detracts from those things. And people are so busy that they haven't stopped to realize it. So when you talk about money, when you look at your bank account statement, your checking register, whatever it may be, or your credit card statement, ultimately, when you see that money going out, you see a ledger of, okay, I spent here. That should be an inventory of saying, what do you think is going to bring you life? And you get to see how you've done. It's a survey of how you're doing and where your money's going to say, is it delivering the feelings that you want it to? And why I think when we talk about money, it should always be a bigger conversation than merely, hey, the goal is $10,000 in the bank.
That's deep because, yeah, like you said, I mean, when people, we all have conversations about money all the time, whether it be budgeting or investing or just where we're going to eat tonight. I mean, it all relates to money and it is all relative. So that quote has always stuck with me. So I like that. I think that's a good lead into today's conversation. Like I said, we all have budgets. I don't care how much money you make. There's always a budget, weekly, monthly, that you need to be in or should be in. And so, we all have car insurance and we all have house insurance. I mean, the tangibles that we have to have, it's the law of the land to have the auto insurance. It's, you have a bank or a mortgage that's requiring it on the house, not to mention our financial interest in it. But what about the intangibles that nobody's, making us or, saying we have to have them, but there's people at home that depend on us. And so when you look at these things, it's like, you're not just buying another policy to have something and spend more money, but there's a planning aspect to it. And so when I was kind of doing some research, I found 4 financial catastrophes that anybody could eventually face, potentially. Medical, whether it be health related, disability, just protecting our paycheck. And the statistics I found on that were just amazing. Premature death, which, nobody wants to discuss, but it is a reality. And then living too long, which I don't know about you, but I have not ever thought about living too long and running out of money, but it's a fear that a lot of people have.
We don't even.
So when you look at these 4 things, I mean, how do you put this in a plan for somebody? And how do you, because, hey, you've got groceries, you've got kids, you've got, games, and they need new cleats for their, team. So there's just so many things this encompasses. How do I even make room, for something else? But we don't know what's around the bend in life.
Yeah. So there's so much I want to say this laid out, and it's all really great. I mean, what you're saying, worthwhile topics. So we don't have to have insurance. Like, you legally, yes, and the law getting more and more saying, hey, you need to protect. But saying, like, as a society, like, we don't even have to go there. The reason we have insurance is because we've built up enough assets to say, hey, you need to protect, against these things. That there's all this capital in our system now there's the ability to have a functioning risk management, risk sharing, dichotomy. And it's really a good problem to have. And a lot of people are like, oh, I hate it because I can't see, I'm only going to be better off if something goes wrong by purchasing insurance, which it should be that way. But you're right, it was a good lead in from what we previously just talked about, because what money is about, what our lives are about, is about feeling as full as possible. And kind of the next step beyond that is not saying, I want to have a full life just as long as these certain factors go my way. But to be able to say, no matter what happens today, get out of bed, say, no matter what happens, I am going to be fine. Like, the most important things are taken care of. And in that sense, you start to become untouchable. That I would hate to have my joy dependent upon, say, my wife, Sarah, always having a good day, because she doesn't always have a good day. There's things that go wrong in hers. And for me to be able to find my joy independently of that is really important. And when it comes to finances, you need not say, oh, as long as I don't lose my income, everything's fine. Because as you said, in the disability statistics, or even other scenarios which cause you to go through times of your life where you don't have an income, that is a very real possibility. And so much of that falls completely out of your control. So why would you want to give one of the most significant parts of your life out to the chaos of this world, which has shown us what usually can go wrong will go wrong? And why the insurance conversation becomes so vital, because I would hate to have the pressure. I hate it when my clients have the pressure, any of the people I care about have the pressure of, things are okay as long as this goes right. And we know that as long as is such a big if, because so much goes wrong in this crazy world. So that's my first thought when I start hearing you talk about the intangibles of insurance. And yes, we are required to have homeowners by our mortgage company. We're required by our states to carry the auto coverages to a limit. But when it comes to those things that, oh, I have the freedom to choose whether or not to have it, then it is independently up to, people we work with to make the decisions. Hey, is it worth it for me or not? And say, ultimately, you can choose to go without it. But is that putting you in the place where you say, my life will be the most full? Because really, you're saying my life will be good as long as certain things don't happen. Or maybe somebody says, I can go without insurance, and I'm really, truly comfortable with the worst case scenario where I could lose everything. Like, everything could be gone, financially speaking, which, maybe there are people who are comfortable with that. I think most of the people we come into contact with would absolutely not say that to be true.
Well, and you mentioned, the first thing you mentioned there was having, assets to protect. And I mean, what if you're a young couple, newly married, maybe late 20s, let's say, and you don't have a lot of assets, you're renting a house, and maybe you really have just a little bit in a 401k that doesn't amount to much. And then you have your couple of vehicles. So in that instance, there's not a lot of assets, but there is the person at home that's depending on you. Mm-hmm. So how do you, and they may have a little bit of life insurance through work, 10, 20, 50,000. Right. It's not a have to, but I think there's that tightrope of risk management. Yeah. You might say it's not insurance, it's risk management that we're walking that fine line. Right. So it's difficult. You are balancing money as well as risk.
Right. Well, it's a really valid point to say insurance needs are not created equal across the board, and why someone as an insurance advisor, as an agent yourself, as a broker, trying to find the best fits for people is why you have a value, is because it's not a formula to say, hey, I punch in, I'm a 30-year-old male in Missouri, I do this income, or I do this occupation, and boom, here's my insurance needs. Like, it's not that simple, because I'm a unique individual, and you come across, and I come across unique individuals all the time. And so somebody who is in their 20s, who doesn't have a lot of assets, their needs aren't categorized already for them. It really depends on what are you prepared to endure and what can you handle. As you're talking, I think about something that's going to seem totally off base, but I promise it'll come back around to make a point. So one of my greatest fears, as far as foreign relations, is that one of our country's enemies will set off electromagnetic pulse. And I don't let it keep me up at night, but there's actually an EMP awareness day that a couple of people have come up with, because they say it's one of the greatest risks to our nation, because we are so dependent upon the forces of electricity, plus the ability of all of the information that's now carried via circuits, that if those were all fried by a weapon like that, it would truly shut us down. And it's interesting to say, wow, we live in a time where, yeah, it would be absolutely chaotic. Whereas just 150 years ago, like a weapon like that wouldn't mean anything, because people were used to living without all the circuits that are connecting everywhere. So that's to say, when you have someone in their 20s who doesn't have a lot of assets, it very well may be that they haven't reached that point where the electromagnetic pulse isn't a risk to them. Because, hey, let's say you did lose your income, or let's say you're married with a spouse, you don't have kids, you rent. Is there really a need for life insurance at that point? There may be, because of what you learned, but you find that, wow, okay, if that were Sarah and I's case when we were 25, let's say, just starting in our careers, and I passed away, what would Sarah really need? Well, she wouldn't need anything, because likely she would get remarried and find another spouse who has an income and build a life that I would be not forgotten, but I would have no role in her life after she established a new one. And so what would a extra $250,000 done for her? I think it could have even done more damage, for her to not stay engaged at that point. So that's something you have to consider of, where do you find yourself and really what are you able to endure?
And I think in that instance, just something that would take care of the final expenses. I mean, she may not need something that lasts very long as far as replacing of income, but just something to take care of the final expenses, because who at 25 has $10,000 to drop?
Exactly. And so to say, let's go back to that scenario and say, all right, you wake up on tomorrow morning, and that happens, and you're distraught, and you say, whoa, we do need to take care of final expenses. Where would that honestly come from? And if the answer is like, I have no idea, it wouldn't get any easier to figure out the idea when your mind is a mush from the emotional cost of losing someone so close. So to put that plan in place, and when we can think in the light, we can use and put that plan for the dark times, and just know, like, all right, as crummy as it is to think about the course that death or disease, disability, all that can ruin in our lives, the last thing we want to do is not have a plan to help account for the things we can in those situations, which is why I think ultimately a fullness of life involves having an answer for those darkest of times.
I like that. Can you touch on medical? Health insurance has changed so much over the last several years. And how many people have debt related to medical bills? I mean, it adds up very quickly, and it's out of our control in a way. So how can you touch on that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So when I think about you as a man I trust to engage on insurance advice, to throw ideas back and forth, one thing I appreciate about you is you operate where you still get paid based on products that you engage and help people with. So that is definitely a conflict of interest. However, what you've proven, as opposed to many others in the industry, is like, all right, I'm going to get you good information, and we can go back and forth. And if it's not a good fit, I will have the integrity to say so. So I consider you more of a risk advisor who happens to sell insurance, and why I think we get along so well, because I just don't trust too many of the people, who are salesmen in a sense. So I say that first because with medical, honestly, because it's becoming such a chaotic, evolving industry, like, first and foremost for everybody listening, make sure you stay as healthy as you can. Like, do the hard work to stay as healthy as you can, because that's the only thing you can control, and something that is changing so much. But when it comes to insuring against the risk that, hey, there's going to be things happen, like so many things that can happen to us medically and health-wise that are out of our control, like, you have to have a plan of what that looks like. That's where the grand balancing act comes in, though, of, okay, honestly, how am I prepared to handle the worst case scenarios of the things that can happen to me medically? And one of the biggest things to talk through is, all right, what are my deductibles? What are my, co-insurance, my copay? What's that premium trade-off? Because it's pay a little here, get a little more here, and just balancing those two acts. And it's not simple. And why you, Brandon, have a job, why I have a job to help people figure that out and say, all right, how do we get this balance to reflect what is most important to you? Where it really gets important and where I fail at the most is to say things will go wrong, and you can't just assume like, oh yeah, I'll go with the $10,000 deductible because what could happen, and say you can go with a $10,000 deductible, but you need to close your eyes and you need to imagine the scenario that's going to cause you to burn through that entire deductible. And do you have a plan to do it? Because like you mentioned earlier, most people do not have the savings to manage a $2,000 deductible, let alone a $10,000. So does that answer what you're looking for?
Yeah, it does. I was reading too, and I've got a note here I'm looking at. 68%, I can link this up in the show notes, but 68% of Americans do not have, they have no savings earmarked for emergencies. And this was in regards to disability. So we're talking about the health insurance, but it's amazing the statistics reading about the number of people that go just get disabled, whether it be a short term or long term, and they don't have any protection, nothing to back that up. And here they are sitting here with no income whatsoever. That's scary.
Absolutely. And I really think disability insurance is the single most glaring need of most of the people that you and I come across with on a daily basis, because the potential liability is so large. And yet, because it's so large, it's not necessarily cheap, and so it causes people to back away from, oh, that's the premium. Well, I'm just going to risk it. It's like, do you really understand what you're risking? And do you really understand how that would change your life? And so if those things actually happen to someone who's completely unprepared, people are resilient. They'll find some other ways, but I imagine it's not ways they would ever choose, whether that's family dependency, government dependency. There's a lot of risks, new risks, when you start to go down those roads. So I think that's a true statistic from my practice with people, as far as how many people actually have an emergency savings for that. In that case, though, there's no amount of savings that could cover years and years of lost income, especially when we're talking about people in their 20s and 30s, and we're not just talking about that, but in those cases, the net present value of future income is the single greatest asset. I'll say that one more time because I think it's something that totally goes over so many of the people that we have as peers. Your future income is the single greatest asset you have. And so that becomes the most important asset to have a plan to protect. Whereas a lot of people are still worried about premature death in their 20s or 30s. Like, no, you need to be talking about disability long before you're talking about premature death. and a lot of the time, because it is your greatest risk. And if the worst really happens in those cases, you're likely going to be screwed.
Okay. So we've talked about the fear of emergency savings, for instance. How many people, have the fear of flying, a fear of spiders or snakes? But how often do you hear about people having the fear of outliving their income? I'm hearing about, as I was reading and studying on this, of course, healthcare costs are skyrocketing, and the population is getting older and older due to the advances in medicine. So, what are your thoughts on this?
How long do you want to live, Brandon?
That's a loaded question.
I agree, it is loaded, but I ask it in all seriousness. Like, what would you give to an answer if I said, how long do you want to live?
I hope to see my great grandkids.
Yeah, that's cool. What if you are like out of your mind by that point? Do you want to be alive to see your grandkids?
Probably not.
that's what comes to my mind when we start talking about the end of life. First of all, I think it's also a great tragedy that people, they value life. They might say they value life, but what they really mean is I value life as long as there's something that life can still be, productive for me. And when it comes to those who are nearing end of life, whether that be someone in their late 60s or someone who's approaching 100, society as a whole can say they value them as much as want, but the way we treat often those people shows that no, we don't really value your life as much as we value the 35-year-old working hard, producing something. And that, I think, has a lot of philosophical underpinnings that we could hash out. But I say that because I think what happens is that a lot of people haven't put really good thought into those end of life functions, end of life, like how do you provide provisions? We'll call it provisions. The end of life provisions, the smartest people don't want to put their thoughts towards that because it's not very glorifying. I want to live as long as I can operate and be productive. I do. And after that, I hope I pass away. I don't want to be a net sucker, a net user. I'd always like to be a giver. And I think people should have the same mentality as they start to prepare for the end of their life. And they are going to lose the ability to give their own gifts. And that doesn't just mean I need to produce an income. There's a lot more way than money to produce something that's giving to society. But because people don't prepare for the end of life, they lose the ability to give and become a net user of resources much earlier than they otherwise would. And often people are saying, oh, it's a tragedy. Look at this someone wake up on their 85th birthday and be like, oh, I'm almost out of money. What am I to do? And they'll go over on a government bankroll. And the problem is not on that morning, oh, how could you do that, you 85-year-old? The problem was in their, their 20s, 30s, 40s, or even start at the beginning of their life. They should have been thinking about it long beforehand. The issue for you and I, though, with those people, whether the need is insurance, whether the need is advanced savings strategies, it's hard to make something so distant become a reality that would motivate action today. So that's the difference between someone who can plan for the end of life well, possibly insuring it if that's what the need is, or planning in other ways around that. It's really tough to do. And I think it's not going to happen unless there's something done to motivate, to make that picture clear of, hey, Brandon is going to be 80 years old someday. Likely. You'll either be gone or you'll be 80 someday. One of the two. When you're 80, are the things that are important to you now any less important to you then? Probably not. And so how are you going to make and help yourself have this fullness of life till your 80th birthday or till your 100th birthday or 120, whatever that may be? So I think it's something that in our industry we should be talking about more and more, but not from the angle of oh, so we have this product here for you and it fits perfect, because then people are oh, I see why you're talking to me about that. And it's no, it's about you. It's about your fullness of life. And that's why you need to find a strategy. And hey, I know about things that can help you do that. So
I like that. I like that. So you've been known to say the best is yet to come. What are you looking forward to?
Oh, I look forward to so much. It's even a tough question to answer because I truly believe I have no idea how good things will be. First and foremost, what I said earlier, I strive every day to become more and more untouchable by the things that are out of my control. And so that involves financial planning for myself, my own family, career planning. How do you set this up to say, I don't want to be impacted when an industry changes, oh, woe is me, I chose an industry that was totally disrupted. and now I have to go re-educate or, you know, recalibrate my life. It's like, that's my fault for choosing that industry. You know, I didn't happen to be lucky enough to sit in an industry that wasn't disruptive, you know, for some other people's cases. For my case, I continually want to be looking at how do we provide value? Something we've talked about a lot with, you know, with guys we've talked about. You keep providing value, and good just follows that. Like, you can't keep goodness away when you're creating goodness for people. It sounds fluffy, but it has absolutely been the reality of my life. And that comes from somebody who wasn't very confident that the best was yet to come for most of my life. So I am continually learning, because much of what I speak about, I often am speaking out of my own ignorance, meaning I need to do all these things. Like, I have to be reminded often the importance of risk planning, the importance of coming to grips of what are the worst case scenarios, and have I protected myself against those. And so when I say the best is yet to come, it means life is practice. You know, and we're never really at that destination. It's like, oh, this is it, I've made it. It's like, no, like, we'll continue to practice. And if we're practicing with an intentional plan and a destination to pursue, I think we get better and better and better. And it's not dependent upon the circumstances thrown at us. It's dependent upon us. It's like that independence that truly is the most free feeling I know that people could experience.
Wakefield, thank you for coming on today. Thank you for your time. I know somebody somewhere is going to get something out of this. This was very, very good. How can people get a hold of you?
I would encourage people to hop on to my website, which is greaterthanfinancial.com, greaterthanfinancial.com. And on there, they can sign up for my email newsletter, and I'll send blasts occasionally like, hey, here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what's going on. They'll also find ways to follow me on Twitter, which is just at Wakefield Hare, or the Facebook page, or the other social media outlets.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Wake. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Brandon, and keep up the great work.